Today, we want to talk and to walk you also through the evolution of structured data submission. So our topic today is eCTD 4.0. Let me quickly introduce myself, or let's introduce ourselves. My name is Maren Müller. I'm a member of the product management team at eCTD. And eCTD, for those of you who don't know us, we are a software and service provider for the life science industry, not only focusing on publishing, but really the entire end-to-end platform. But as today our topic will be eCTD 4.0, today we are focusing a bit on the publishing aspect. Then I would quickly pass over to Daniel.
Hi everyone, and this is Daniel speaking from Asphalion Regulatory Operations Department. I will also lead you on this webinar together with Maren, our partner eCTD. Asphalion, also for the ones that you already don't know us, is a consultancy company, a service provider focused on the life cycle and regulatory services on pharmacovigilance, medical devices, scientific and medical writing, and also on regulatory operations. I'm part of the European network of subject matter experts for eCTD 4.0. So together today with Maren, we will follow you on how eCTD 4.0 is being implemented. So a pleasure to meet you all.
All right, perfect. Here we have listed down what you can expect today. So of course we talk a bit about implementation timelines globally. Then we will introduce you to the language and concepts because there is indeed something quite new in the eCTD 4.0 world before we discuss then here also some processes that impact you as a company when transforming to eCTD 4.0. Also, Daniel will explain us the differences between regions because, as always, eCTD, ICH based, but the regions are of course different. And then also we will have a summary of changes if you compare eCTD 3.2 with eCTD 4.0. And then in the end, I will quickly take over again to show you a very brief demonstration of eCTD 4.0 reviewing software. And then, of course, we will also take some time to answer your questions. In case we cannot manage to answer all of them, then, of course, we will get in touch with you afterwards. All right, I will also now stop sharing my camera so we can all really focus on the topics here. And we start with the timelines. You might know the official ICH webpage where you can see all of these timelines, and that is what we have summarized here right away. So I'm starting here on top of the list because Japan, they are already accepting optionally eCTD 4.0 since a while. So they are really early adopters, I would say. And next year, the eCTD 4.0 format will even be mandatory already. So if you're submitting to Japan, then latest now, the project should start to implement an eCTD 4.0 software, if not yet done. In the European Union, the pilot currently is still running with EMA. So we have successfully finalized phase number 1, where vendors only participated. Now we are in the middle of phase 2, where also applicants are allowed to submit their pilot submissions or some test submissions. And also that is quite successful. There are various scenarios that are tested, and it's not yet done, so that will definitely progress because things like forward compatibility and submission grouping was not yet tested, but this will be done also very soon. And EMA is also starting to accept eCTD 4.0 for centralized procedures already by end of this year, beginning of next year. That is planned right now. And already 2027, it will be mandatory. But again, for centralized procedures only, MRP, DCP, national, as always, that typically follows a bit later. But that all will then be officially communicated by EMA. The US FDA, they are also accepting already eCTD 4.0 submissions optionally for initial submissions. So they have not yet tested the forward compatibility. I'm not sure if they will do, but at the moment you can submit eCTD 4.0 only for initial applications, and this will then even be mandatory in 2029. Then next year, there are several pilots planned. So we can see that for Canada, we can see that for Switzerland. They are also typically following EMA quite quickly. They are fast follower. Then also Brazil is planning a pilot for next year and Australia as well. And then 1 year later, most likely starting 2027, all of them will start accepting eCTD 4.0 submissions initially, either for initial applications only or also forward compatibility. That is then something that they will communicate in time. And Korea is a bit later than starting 2028, most likely. They will optionally accept eCTD 4.0. And for the countries or regions like Korea, Brazil, Australia, it's not yet known when this format will become mandatory. And this is the list, again, the official one from ICH. Of course, there are more discussions happening in the background already because even more regions are at least discussing if they should move to eCTD 4.0 and implement the new standard. Now let's get a bit into the concepts and the language because there are indeed also some differences. And on the left-hand side, we see the 3.2, so the currently ICH version or the current one, and on the right-hand side, 4.0. And we are starting on the highest level, that is the dossier. Because today it's not really a defined term, I would say, and it depends a bit on the region. So in European Union, we say it's a dossier. In the US FDA already today, we say it's an application, but it's not defined as such, not on ICH level and not globally. And this will change. So starting with 4.0, it will for all regions be an application. The same for the reg activity. Yes, we are having today European Union reg activity somehow in some other regions as well. The US FDA, again, they do not really have reg activities, at least not following the same concept as in the European Union. It's a bit different. And also this is then clearly defined right now, even in the XML message, that is the submission. And the submission was somehow, at least sometimes, also used as the sequence. So the message, the XML, the package with the documents you are sending to the authority, at least in some regions, that was called submission in the past. And this will no longer be the case because this is now also something that is clearly defined, the submission unit. This is the package you are sending to the authority, including data, XML backbone, and documents. And also the 4-digit sequence number disappears because now we will have a single-digit number starting with 1. Typically, next one is then 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Lifecycle states is also changing. And to be honest, I like these changes a lot. I mean, we're still having the lifecycle operation of new documents. We are having still the option to replace something or to delete something. But finally, append will not be there anymore. And that is really quite good because somehow that was still used for eCTD 3.2, at least for STF files that, by the way, are also not existing in 4.0 anymore. But now it's really officially not included anymore. But instead, we're having something very nice, and we will explain that a bit later with more details. We are having an update mode that is for metadata in case you want to change, for example, or correct a document title also. But again, we will discuss it a bit later. Then all of us, we know the beloved specific sections in eCTD 3.2. We do not have that anymore as such, but we are having keywords. We are having a lot of keywords. We are having optional keywords. We are having required keywords. We are having standard-defined keywords. Also here, we will have a few more details during this presentation. And we are having something completely new, and that is the context of use. This is really also something quite technical, I would say, but at least on a high level, it is definitely good to understand what that is, how it looks like, because this is key in the new XML message. So far, just as an overview. Also, the folder structure will change. So beside the 4-digit sequence number, that will not be there anymore. We discussed that already. In principle, the modules, of course, they stay, right? Because this does not change. But the granularity of the folder structure, that changes because it's just not relevant anymore. File names and folder structure is not relevant because everything is about metadata and keywords, what is reflected in the XML anyway. So no one will review the submission in a file share output anymore. No one. Also, the checksum will be a different one. Today we have the MD5. We know all this standard, and this will also change to SHA-256. And also, big change is that we will not have two XML files anymore, but we will have only one, and that is our submission unit XML. And by the way, you do not see here a util folder. That's also not needed. We do not need the style sheet. We do not need all of these technical files in the new standard. And this is the consequence, I would even say. So on the left-hand side, we see the index XML that is opened in a browser, while even today, the modern web browsers or the currently supported web browsers, they do not support to access local style sheets anymore, right? So when you're trying to open an XML with your Google Chrome or so, then it's not displayed nicely anymore. You can force some browsers to work like the old beloved Internet Explorer, but typically this is even not possible anymore. But latest with eCTD 4.0, you can see that. And that is what I meant with its keywords, its metadata. It's full of code, so it's not really human readable anymore. You cannot really navigate nicely through the submission unit XML. So latest now, it's really necessary to implement an eCTD 4.0 reviewing and viewing tool. Here again, the comparison of some examples in eCTD 3.2.2 envelopes. So again, opened in a browser with a browser that is supporting to access local style sheets, because only with the local style sheet in the util folder, it's possible to display that nicely. But we are also not having an envelope as such anymore in eCTD 4.0. Of course, we're having application, submission unit, document, context of use, metadata, but not as an envelope element. And important, we don't have these style sheets anymore. So no option to display that nicely in a browser only. And the structure as such also gets a bit more, I would say, a little bit more complex, but this is nothing that the publisher needs to understand in every technical detail. But still, I think it's good to know and good to have here an overview. So first of all, we are having a quite flexible hierarchy now, because the tree structure is not that fixed anymore. We mentioned already that it's all about context of use that is creating the tree structure. We don't have these elements anymore, as we know that today for eCTD 3.2. And we are typically starting here on application level in the message with documents and keyword definition. The submission, we said already, this is like the rec activity today, also here, of course, with some metadata. And the context of use, this is really the element that is also assigned with some keywords, that is defining then the tree structure, that is referencing a document, that can have optional or mandatory keyword. It depends a bit. And these contexts of uses, that's all defined by ICH and the regions itself. So the document is no longer standalone as a leaf also in the XML, but it's always coming with a context of use. So one document is referenced by one context of use, and it also has a priority number. Also for that, we are having some more examples in a bit. And again, the hint that you cannot really view that without a viewer anymore. In the viewer, you even would not see too much difference between 3.2 and 4.0. But if you check the XML itself, oh my goodness, there is a huge difference. because also in the submission unit, there's much more elements, as we can see here as well. So the context of use, this is sometimes a bit hard to understand. That's why I want to highlight here a few more details. So the context of use is really something that's the element that is defining the CTD section. So for example, module 2.3 drug substance, this is our context of use. This is defining the heading element of the document that is referenced to this context of use. And this is nothing that the publisher invents also. This is really controlled vocabularies that is defined and that is then available in the publishing solutions. And it is really a kind of a metadata or container for documents. Technically, it's also the context of use where then later on lifecycle is applied. So if you're adding a new document or a replaced document or a deleted document, technically this is all sitting on the context of use level. And this context of use can have also the keywords. So technically it's defined on the context of use level, not on the document level. But again, how it's then displayed in the reviewing solution, that's another topic. And there is never an empty context of use. You're always having a context of use referenced with a document. The other way around as well, we said that already, a document can also not be standalone. It always needs to be referenced by a context of use. And there's also no one-to-many or many-to-one relationship, one document per context of use. That is what we said already. Technically, it's the context of use that is also the element with the life cycle. In case the context of use code is the same and the keywords as well, then we are talking about context groups. So let's say I have multiple documents in 2.3 drug substance and they are having the same substance and the same manufacturer. Then we are talking about a context group. So also to know that. Then there's also a status that is applied to a context of use. Active, I think that's easy to understand. It's active when it's current, so then the reviewing or viewing solution is still displaying this context of use and the related document as active and current. But when you replace a context of use, then the previous version is no longer relevant, right? So it's not current anymore, then the status is suspended. But with that, also the previous version gets somehow obsolete. So this is nothing the publisher actively assigns the status obsolete, but this is really when you have replaced something, it's no longer relevant, then the previous version is becoming obsolete and is not part of the current view anymore. Keywords, keywords, keywords. We mentioned that already, that we're having much more keywords than we know from today. And it's clearly defined which ones are optional, which ones are required. We see here a list. And it's also clearly defined which context of use includes which keyword. And for some keywords, they are also coming as controlled vocabularies. Some might also be sender-defined keywords. And the beauty is now that at least for some display values for some keywords, you can even update them, what was also not possible today. The priority number is also something that is completely new, introduced into eCTD 4.0. And if you're using that in combination with the context group, so that means with documents with the same context of use and same keywords, then you can reorder them in this context group. So the group as such is also replacing the node extension. So although all context of uses, they are still assigned or still defined, let's say, so the tree structure, but still it is an option to create additional groups if you want to group, as an example, study documents. So node extension is not existing anymore, but group title. And you might want to reprioritize the documents or order the documents in one group or in one context group, let's say. And by doing that, the priority number is automatically assigned by the publishing solution, and then the order is defined. So this is really also a new concept, because today in eCTD 3, you cannot technically order the documents. Yeah, somehow you can maybe influence the order. They are displayed in the XML, but it's not clearly defined. And now we have the priority number that is, by the way, also a mandatory element, and you can change the priority number in follow-up submission units. So really, really helpful concept, I would say. And here, just to have a bit more explanation again. So here we are sitting on the context of use. That would be our 3 to S23 control of materials. In case the keyword is the same, then in this case it's the excipient, then we are talking about a context group, because the context of use is the same and the keyword is the same. And now what you do not necessarily see in publishing software, but in the XML message, you see that for each of these context of uses, the priority number is assigned. It's always a 3-digit number. And typically you are starting with the lowest one, and then the next higher one, and then the next higher one is displayed here. It is also recommended to have a bit of a space between these numbers. So typically you do not start with 200 and then 201 and then 202 and then 203, but really with bigger steps. 200, 300, 400, 500. And why is that? Because in case I want to reorder in a follow-up submission unit and I want to add a document between these two here, and then I need some space for my number, right? So if I would have already 200 and 201, what would I do then? So that's again something the user does not necessarily see, because it's quite technical from my point of view, but reordering in the publishing solution is quite easy just by arranging the documents accordingly. And all of these technical things, that's then done in the background by the solution. Yeah, the controlled vocabulary. So there are really a lot. So first of all, we have that today as well, right? So we have schemas, we have value lists, we have DTDs from EMA, US, FDA, from all of the authorities. Each of them, they are having controlled vocabularies. And we will have that in the future as well. There are maybe a bit more controlled vocabularies, but the concept at least is not very new. Then we are also having controlled vocabularies that are defined on ICH level. So they are then really globally assigned. That does not necessarily mean that each and every region is using them, but in theory they could, because that's really on a global level if it's defined by ICH. And then we are still having additional organizations that are also defining controlled vocabularies, like the ISO is an example, or also HL7. For example, the update mode codes, we discussed already a little bit the update, that I can now update a document title or maybe a keyword display name in case the manufacturer name is changing. So these are defined by HL7. So it's a combination of several stakeholders, I would say. Then let's discuss briefly about lifecycle operations. Again, this is technically sitting on a context of use. And there is one rule that we know from today, and that applies also for eCTD 4.0. You can only replace a context of use if it's the same context of use and keyword combination. So I can still not replace documents in 32P31 if the manufacturer keyword is a different one. So today we would say lifecycle operations across sections is not possible, and this is still true for eCTD 4.0. But there's one beautiful new concept here as well, and that is the replacement many to one and one to many. That means I'm having my context group, again, the same combination of context of use and keyword. There may be sitting 3 documents. And in the follow-up submission unit, I'm replacing within the same group all of these 3 documents with only one. And this is just an example. I'm replacing 3 with 1, but I can also replace 2 with 1. I can also replace 6 with 1. So there's really no limitation. And the other way around as well. So this is also new. Let's assume I'm having only one document, and due to any reason, the granularity of this document is now changing. So then I can easily replace this single document with 3 documents in a follow-up submission unit. So also quite nice concept, I would say. This is just another view, and just to show that you can, of course, always still delete documents. You can always add documents as new ones, not only in the initial submission unit, but also in any follow-up submission unit. You can replace, but this time now one to many or many to one. And this is our the update mode. So these are at least how we at eCTD are displaying the different lifecycle operations, let's say, in our reviewing solution. So again, if the name would be updated or so, then we would display it with that icon. So yeah, we are having here much information. What we discussed so far already is that you can indeed use this update mode to update the priority number in case you want to change the order of your documents. You can update the document title, but only in case you do not really change the meaning of the document, but you can correct typos if there is one. You can update the document language, the keyword definition display name. This is really something I like. You remember now in eCTD 3.2, when the name of the manufacturer is changing, either you keep the old name forever, or you really have to delete all documents within this specific section, create a new one, and add all documents again. So both is not so nice, and this will be resolved with updating the display name of the keywords, like manufacturer name is changing. And with all of these updates here, you do not need to resubmit any document physically again. So even if you change the document title, this is then just included in the message, but the document is not submitted again. And depending on what you are updating, it has an impact either within the same submission unit only, or within the entire application, or even across applications, because with the beauty of the UUIDs that will also be used in eCTD 4.0, much more than we know it from today. Today, only some regions have in the envelope a UUID, but in 4.0, nearly all elements will have a UUID, and it helps us always to reference and to universally identify an element. And if I'm updating it in one application, it might also impact another application without having ever submitted something for this other application. So can also be very, very helpful, and it avoids that I'm sending duplicated documents and information all the time. So it also increases the efficiency. Again, this is just again the examples where you can use the update mode. So the priority number is to change the order of the documents. And again, technically it's sitting on a context of use, but within the reviewing and publishing solutions, you will see that on document level, because at least today, this is still the case, right? It is the documents that include the content that is then assessed and reviewed by the authority. So this impacts the submission unit where you change the priority number. The document title change that impacts the entire application. So if you have reused that in another submission unit, it will be updated there as well, what is also quite nice. And then, or across applications even, exactly, because documents, cross-application references, we know that already today, the concept, but it will be much more enhanced with eCTD 4.0. And within the application, if you're changing the display name of a keyword like the manufacturer name, then this is impacting the entire application. All right, so that was it in very, very brief regarding the language structure and concepts. And now I would hand over to Daniel, who will explain us a bit more about the processes that are behind. Up to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Maren. I'm going to share then my screen now. Okay, so here about processes by processes, here we want to explain two concepts that are not new for eCTD, but have more implications and can be for sure more beneficial for the uh, for .O implementation. The first one is forward compatibility. Okay, forward compatibility refers to the fact of converting a current eCTD, current version 3.2.2 into a version 4.0 sequence. Okay, so the process happens behind the scenes. You know, you as a publisher or expert on the field, you don't need to do anything when turning a sequence that has started on version 3.2 to 4.0, but happens mainly on the code. Okay, so the process will be similar to the current process when we change DTDs for at regional level, for instance, right now on Europe, quite recent, or in other regions. Okay, so the concept and the principle will be the same. So changing from one version to another, at least on uh, publishing and software level. Okay, so in theory, and in principle, in any of the guidelines published so far, there is no need for baselining. Okay, but this is something that uh, is decided or can be decided at regional level, but so far there is no need of baseline for switching from current version to 4.0. Okay, but for instance, I'm thinking right now on countries like Brazil, as you see on the first slide that Maren showed you about the implementation that they not even have already eCTD. So maybe the situation for that particular country can be different, and taking advantage of 4.0 implementation, they are deciding to provide an eCTD sequence, but in theory, there is no baseline needed, okay? As always, as happens with the former format of NIS, once you submit a sequence on 4.0, always on 4.0. You cannot back again to version 3.2, okay? Uh, And within the another process that consists of the time we skip for this webinar about group submissions. Obviously, if you are submitting group submissions, applying for more than one dossier, more than one application, obviously all these sequences should be already be converted to 4.0. Okay. So this is an example on how forward compatibility will work. So we have an application 5634 with our initial marketing authorization sequences, number 0, number 1, number 2, and number 3. But now, we wanted to turn into 4.0 because, imagine that this is a national procedure, and in a couple of years, in Europe, a national procedure is mandatory to be submitted at 4.0, and you need to submit, this type 2 safety variation, so it's as simple as turning your sequence into 4.0, like upgrading your dossier, your sequence, and in this case, obviously the sequence number will be different. It will be start by one by digits, not the 4 digits. Uh, this will be the sequence number 4. Okay. Oh, sorry. Sorry. And this, for instance, if you need to replace a document in the summary, the SMPC section, you just need to replace the document because for sure, you need to update this document because of a new undesirable effect. So the lifecycle operations will be replaced in this case as we follow with the current standard. Okay. So the other concept that we wanted to explain today is document reuse. Document reuse is nothing new on 4.0. Is something that is already being used on 3.2. Okay. In fact, uh, this document reuse is the ability to submit just a document once, the physical document once, but referring the same document, referring with the ID or UID on the same sequence, for instance. So this is something that is uh, already within the current ICH specification. Is laid down here. Okay, it's only applicable, for instance, in Europe across the submission unit, across your sequence. Okay, it's the fact of providing the file once and providing multiple leaf elements referencing within the XML. Okay, so the file appears within the XML several times, but only one file, one physical file is exported on the sequence. Okay, so this is document reuse across submission units. Okay, within your sequence. Okay, within 4.0, you can also do document reuse across submissions on different regulatory activities and also across applications. Okay, so this is the main benefit of 4.0. Okay, uh, the document reuse across applications, at least on the US, is not a new concept. For the ones that you are into US submissions, you remember that there is currently the cross-application reference process that you can do a document reuse, across several dossiers, several applications. But now with 4.0, this is a concept, a process established at ICH level, and it's up to each region to decide if they wanted to apply this document reuse across applications or not. Okay. So this is now an example on how where use document reuse within the same application is applicable. Okay, so this is within your dossier. Okay, you have a 2-3P section where you include a physical file here, but you want to reuse this same file, for instance, on another context of views, another section, but you don't need to provide again the file just referencing referencing the ID, UID of this file on this section. Okay. In case of eCTD, this file will appear with this chain in gray. Okay, meaning that this file is being reused. Okay, within the same application. Okay, so this is still the same concept that this is as of today for version 3.2. Okay, but now for 4.0, you can also do this across applications. Okay, you have one application, one dossier with their corresponding life cycle and different sequences. You have application one. You submitted first, obviously, the sequence to the authorities, introducing the physical file here on this section, and then later on you wanted to take advantage and reuse this file, uh, in another section, in another dossier, So you can certainly do that, with 4.0 process of document reuse. Okay. So having said that, for enabling this functionality, as you can imagine, all the files need to be stored on the same central repository at agency level, obviously at your premises, but also at agency level. That is why, for instance, that on FDA, currently cross-application reference cannot be done across several and different divisions of FDA. You cannot do cross-application reference across CBER and CDER, for instance. And so far, for in Europe, in the case of Europe, we have a central repository, a common repository for centralized procedures. So for centralized procedures, this can be done, okay, because the central repository is there, all the sequences are stored there. So if those two applications that you are seeing in the screen are centralized procedures, you can actually do this document reuse, but the picture will be different if this is a centralized procedure and a national procedure, or an MRP DCP procedure where we are now playing with different agencies and different central repositories. Okay, so this is why the implementation on Europe for national procedures MRP DCPs are going to come later. Okay, apart from other challenging and things that we are seeing. Okay, but this is one of the main barriers. Okay, in Europe. We already see the ICH principles, the context of uses, context of group, priority number, keywords, control vocabularies, lifecycle operations. Okay, those concepts are fixed and defined by ICH. Okay, and now with this regional part, we wanted to explain a little bit, conscious of the timings, the main difference at regional level. Okay, one thing is common at regional level, that each region needs to define their own Model 1 context of users control vocabulary. The other one that they need to define is the envelope elements. And the other one that they need to define is whether or not they exclude elements defined at ICH. So here in these slides, we are going to see the main difference on these three regions, okay? Europe, US, Canada, Switzerland, and Australia, okay? Uh, on Europe, this is the current envelope, as you can see on the screen, okay? The concepts are highlighted on with a flag on green, okay? So the European envelope is going to be more or less the same, but some fields are removed, and other ones, this is going to be the main difference on the envelope for Europe, are going to be defined by a control vocabulary, okay? And also, in case of the applicant and the international non-proprietary name for substance, these values also needs to be retrieved from European export database in case of applicant from OMS, and in case of the international non-proprietary name for SMS, okay? Apart from the detailing the name of the company, you would need to detail the log ID, organization ID, SMS ID. Okay? In terms of ICH elements that are allowed and not allowed, they are not allowed two-way communications. They are not allowed to change the status of a submission unit, but group submissions are allowed by the first time on Europe. Okay, so this will be a big step. Okay, but in Europe is going to be accepted. So this will be how the new envelope 4.0 metadata on 4.0 looks like. Okay, later on, Maren on the presentation on the demo will show you, but this is how the new envelope will looks like. For the US, the envelope is going to be almost identical. The only thing that is going to be removed is the applicant ID, is the DUNS number is going to be removed. Okay, so group submissions still be allowed. Okay, as of today with 3.2. Okay. Again, two-way communication and submission unit status are not allowed in the US. For Canada, one funny thing here is that they are allowing the two-way communication. Okay, it's true that the Canada guideline is the oldest one published, is from Jan 2019, if I remember well. So two-way communication is the ability to for the health authority, Health Canada in this case, is the ability to reply to the applicant with an eCTD sequence. Okay, instead of replying to a, to a regulatory activity, to something that you send to them through an eCTD sequence instead of sending you an email, so they will be able to send you an eCTD sequence, with their communications and, on their answers on the procedure. Okay, so this will be identified with a hash HC, if you can see here on the screen, with also sequence number, but under the umbrella of Health Canada. Okay, so in theory, this is currently on the guideline, but maybe when the guideline is revised, maybe this is not going to be accepted anymore. But currently is within the guideline, and two-way communication on Canada is allowed. Switzerland envelope and metadata are going to be dramatically changed. Okay, almost everything is going to be removed. Okay. Also, on another main difference with Switzerland is that they are enabling to change a submission unit status is allowed. Okay, so in other regions, when a given sequence is withdrawal proactively or a given variation is rejected by the health authority, you need to submit another eCTD sequence for turning again the dossier structure to the previous version, previous to this sequence that has already been, withdrawn. But with Switzerland, you can accommodate a withdrawal, sending a submission unit, an eCTD sequence, suspending the submission unit status. Okay, so this is a thing that is completely new for Switzerland. It is only allowed on all the guidelines published, only allowed on Switzerland. Okay, so this is the main difference for Switzerland. Australia is following the same principles as they are laid down right now on their latest 322 Module 1 version 3.2 again guideline. Okay, so the concepts are going to be the same, but envelope level. Okay, also again defined by control vocabulary as so far, but there are still they still need to define if they are going to allow group submissions, two-way communication. They need to explain which ICH elements they need to include or exclude that are not yet defined within the published guideline on Australia. Okay. On finalizing, the main difference between the current version that are already explained by Maren, apart from the aforementioned difference on the folder structure, the XML navigation, the sequence number, even the granularity that we did not mention and explain in this webinar, but there is also a slightly difference on the granularity. There is also a new blue granularity within 4.0. Okay. The main difference, in my opinion, relies behind the code. Okay, so the main difference is about the wording, as explained. Okay, so instead of sequence, regional activity and dossier, we are talking about now submission unit, submission and application. Instead of CTD headings, we are now speaking about context of uses. Instead of metadata and attributes, now they are called keywords, also control vocabularies. There are no longer, well, there are note extensions, individual folders that you can create, but now they are called group title keywords, so the concepts are the same, but the meaning, are different. Okay. The control vocabulary wall is more or less the same as currently defined and explained on version 3.2 as metadata attributes, as there are also no possibility to submit the study tagging files, as there are no longer the append operation. There are keyword definition type defines that means to define the same concepts as currently on metadata and the different study tagging file elements. Okay, as you can see here, root of admin, species, type of control, duration, those ones that you are already on FDA and study tagging file submissions you know about these elements. Okay, so now they are turning into control vocabularies and they are becoming more spread across regions. Okay, so the elements defined only so far under a state file, mainly for the US now, are being part on all the regions. Okay, so this is also one of the main difference with 4.0 implementation. And for sure, the main difference already explained by Maren, I don't want to extend much more, is about the new update operations. Okay, active replace and suspend is the same concept as new replace and delete. Append is no longer applicable, therefore no state time files. But the update lifecycle, let's say, operation is completely new. Okay, you can already change the document title. You can reorder even former documents submitted. And for sure, the main benefit of the update operation is that you can already change the metadata, change the keyword definition type, display name. Okay, it's actually a pain for version 3.2 if you commit a typo on a title, or if there is a merge and acquisition and there is a change on the name of a company and the content is the same, the meaning is the same, but you cannot, change the metadata. So with this functionality, you can already do that. Okay. So I think from my side is here is enough. So now, conscious of the time, we are moving to the last part of the session, the demo. So over to you again, Maren.
Yes. Then I will again share my screen. And I think you should see that already. Very good. So this is now our reviewing and viewing solution that we are providing, by the way, not only for the industry, but also for the agency. So they are using exactly the same solution. For them, it's just another branding. It's called Yours Next, while for industry, it's called eSub Manager, but it's the same solution. And I would bet that if you check here the submission in the viewer, then you would not immediately see that it's an 4.0 submission. And that is what I mentioned previously. The technical aspects, they are different. They are more complex, but the concepts, as Daniel also said, that is also, at least from a business perspective, staying the same, right? So I'm still having my modules. I can still navigate here through my documents. I can, of course, also open documents here and do all of the reviewing tasks. I mean, that's included in reviewing tools anyway, with all of the related functionality, but that is really independent of eCTD 3.2 or 4.0. That's why I will not focus on that at all. So our solution is, of course, covering both eCTD 3.2, eCTD 4.0, also other formats, by the way, as well. But as soon as I click here on the sequence metadata, we discussed it already. There is no regional XML anymore. There is no envelope as such anymore, but there are metadata, and we are just displaying them here on top of the submission in case the publisher or the reviewer in this case is also interested in seeing that. And here you see already a bit that it's really eCTD 4.0. I mean, we are showing that here in the header, and also these elements here, right? So they are not really eCTD 3.2 related. We see here also the implementation guide versions and some more metadata here. We are still also showing keywords on different levels like 23S and 23P. So that is for sure still what we are having in our application, plus different views, current, single, cumulative, regulatory activity view. As soon as I'm in the current view, I see also color coding, what is new compared to the previous submission unit. And maybe you can see here, or even better when I click here, that I'm having here my application and I have already 3 sequences, and I was sitting in the submission unit number 3 already, where I do have some changes. And one thing I want to highlight is the one-to-many and many-to-one, because this is so special, and this is also something that you see in the UI. So I'm in the current view. I do have here some blue documents. That means they are somehow updated or new within the submission unit. And I have this icon here with the two little green arrows. That means it's a replace operation. In case I want to have here even more details, I click here on the Lifecycle tab and see the entire history. And that's interesting. So I can see for this document here, there were 3 documents in the initial submission unit number 1. And in submission unit number 2, that was replaced with only 1 document. And by the way, from here, I could also always open them, and then they would be opened in the solution. And now in submission unit number 3, I can see that this document that was replaced here is again replaced with 2 documents. So initially I had 3, then I had only 1 document, and now I'm having 2 documents again. And as this document is currently selected in the submission tree, this is here displayed in bold. And when I click on this one, then this is displayed in bold. And this is now the grid view, but this can become quite complex. We see that already now. And therefore, we are even having a diagram view where you can also zoom in and zoom out if you like. And now I would say that you have immediately an overview of what happened with these documents here. So again, we have 3 in the submission unit number 1. We have replaced them with only 1 document. So this is our many to 1 concept. And now in the latest submission unit number 3, I have again replaced 1 single file with 2. So this is our 1 to many concept. So at least this is what I wanted to show to you. But I hope other than that, you see that although all of these technical details that we talked about today and how the messages are built and created, there's really no need to fear because it is quite user friendly, how the tools can display that. And really from a user perspective, not so much difference compared to eCTD 3.2. All right, that at least on a very, very high level, how this could look like in the reviewing solution. With that, I would quickly see if we do have any other questions. I think there was already one and Daniel answered that, and maybe just quickly checking in the chat if there is anything more. But I do not think so. All right. With that, I would then hand over back to our TOPRA colleagues. And yeah, then I would say thanks a lot for joining the session. If you have more questions, then of course you can always get in touch with us, with Danielle or myself, and then we can discuss that further.